everybody. If you want to open your Bibles up to Matthew chapter 20, that's where we will be. I did not embed the text into the PowerPoint this week. So hopefully Don won't have to do any gymnastics back there. So as you know, we've been talking about Jesus and who is Jesus. And today we're going to look at the idea of Jesus being a giver of grace. And while I would not necessarily say this sermon is about grace per se, I think we have to have some kind of at least basic understanding of what grace is before we move forward into the story we're going to look at today. This feels loud. Now, I don't know if it is or not, but I feel like I can hear myself. Oh, now I'm very soft-spoken. But I feel like we need to kind of take a minute to talk about exactly what grace is, and maybe not what grace is per se, but how unnatural it is to be full of grace. This is not something that we as people are particularly good at, this idea of being graceful or full of grace. It is not necessarily our strength. We like to think that we live in a meritocracy, which means that people get what they deserve. If you deserve more, you should get more. If you deserve less, you should get less. And we're very, very passionate about that. And if you don't believe me, just think of any situation where you think someone didn't get what they deserved or got more than they should have gotten, and think about your reaction to that. You were probably upset. You were probably angry. You were probably mad. That's not right. Especially if you find yourself on the side of, I think I should have gotten more. This is very anger-inducing. The truth is, what we really like is we want grace for us, and we want justice for everybody else. That's oftentimes what we find that we really want. We want to receive grace, but we want everybody else to get justice. And that is going to be an issue when you take that attitude and you place it next to the life of Jesus. That is not going to get you as far with him as it will get you in today's world and in the world as it has always existed. This is not a problem uniquely that is ours. This is something that has always existed. It exists in the Bible. The idea of someone getting something that maybe the other folks didn't think they should have gotten. You don't necessarily have to turn there, but in 1 Samuel 16 is the instance of where Samuel anoints David as the next king. We're not going to read it. I'm just going to talk about it a little bit. But when Samuel anoints David as king, it comes as a surprise to Jesse and his sons because of who David is, the little shepherd boy. He doesn't even come to the event because it's just assumed that David will not be anointed as the king. And in fact, when Jesse's oldest son, good looking, tall, everything that Saul was currently in that situation, there was just an assumed that he would be the choice. That's the world they live in. This is the oldest male child. He's the next up. That's how this works. And God says, the Bible says, Samuel says on behalf of God, God does not see as man sees. God does not see as man sees. This is not a one-off statement that is only true in the context of anointing David as the king. This is true all the time. That God does not see as man sees. We have expectations. We have things that we think, a way that we think things should go. And society teaches us that. Society has always taught that, and it always will teach that. One of the great difficulties we have as Christians is how much influence society has on us, number one, and two, the extent to which we don't know that. We have found a way to kind of merge God into the way we think things work. So instead of God changing the world through us, sometimes we let the world change God through us. And we don't acknowledge the fact that God does not see the way man sees. We proclaim something different sometimes. One of my favorite stories that Jesus tells to illustrate this is found in Matthew 20, if you've already turned there. In Matthew chapter 20, you see a story that in my Bible is titled Laborers in the Vineyard. Now, I do have some incorrect information on the slide, so I will fix that as we read, okay? But laborers in the vineyard. We're going to read the first 7 verses to start. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. Now, whenever we're going to do a parable, those of you that have been hanging out with us every other Monday night know this already. But if you have not, whenever you look at a parable, it is important to look at who is being represented how in the particular story. So the landowner is being portrayed as the representation of the kingdom here. That's important. So the kingdom of heaven is like this landowner. So everything that the landowner does is like how the kingdom works. Okay? That's the whole point of the story. So we got to get that before we move on any further. Okay? The landowner is like the kingdom. Okay? So verse 2. When he had agreed with the laborers for a denarius for the day, he sent them into his vineyard. And he went about the 3rd hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And to those he said, you also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right I will give you. And so they went. Again he went about the 6th and the 9th hour, did the same thing. And about the 11th hour he went out and found others standing around, and he said to them, why have you been standing here idle all day long? They said to him, because no one hired us. He said to them, you go into the vineyard too. So we have 5 different hiring events. I say 3. I'll tell you why I said 3 in a minute. It was just a mistake though. But there are 5 different hiring events at different times during the day. Different people being hired to do a job at different times. Now, how do we typically compensate laborers in today's world? You can say it out loud. Money by the hour. Exactly. We pay by the hour. Right? That's the expectation here. So, if you work 8 hours, you're going to get paid more than somebody that works 1 hour, right? And if that doesn't happen, you probably quit if you have other options. Right? You probably find a job that's a little more fair. So you've got 5 different hiring times. And folks have come in to do this job. Now, there's really only 3 different conversations that we know of through this passage about conversations that happen with the folks that are being hired. The landowner in the very beginning tells the laborers exactly what he's going to pay them. You work for me today, you get a denarius. A day's wage, we'll call that. Okay? So you work for me, you work today, I'm going to pay you a day's wage. They say, sounds great. They go to work. Then the next group comes later on, a few hours later, and the landowner says, I'll give you what is right. Now this is a less specific statement. I'll give you what is right. No problem. And then this is repeated again. And then finally we get to the end of the day, and there's only an hour left in the workday. And the landowner says, why are you still standing here? And they say, because no one has hired us. The landowner says, well, come on and work for me. So they go. So we've got 5 groups of people that have been told three different things. Different meaning not the same, not different as in, things that are opposite of each other. But they're told three different things to these five different groups. So then we get to verse 8. It's everybody's favorite part of the workday, pay time. When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the laborers and pay their wages, beginning with the last group to the first." When those hired about the 11th hour came, each one received a denarius. When those hired first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they grumbled at the landowner, saying, "These last men have worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden and the scorching heat of the day." I don't know about you, but the first thing that stands out to me about this particular part of this story is the order in which he pays the workers. Why do you say that? Because if he pays them in reversed order, this is never an issue. Right? If he pays the ones that came first, gives them their day's wage, and they leave, they have no idea what the others make. They have no clue. They just go. But the landowner, the character in the story that represents the kingdom of heaven, specifically gives a direction to not do it that way. He specifically gives a direction to do it the other way. So he pays the guys that showed up for an hour, and he pays them a day's wage. Now imagine you're one of the other groups. This moment is exciting. Right? Because again, traditionally we're going to get paid by the hour, right? And even though he told us he's going to pay us a day's wage, now wait a minute now, if they worked 1 hour, and I worked 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours, I could take a week off. I'm going to get 8 days' wages. I'm going to get 10 days' wages. I could at least have a long weekend, Sean. I don't have to do this again tomorrow. Got all this money coming to me. And this is exciting. But that's not how it all worked out. That's not how it all worked out. So as we progress, we see a change in the attitude of those that have been there longer. Because now, all of a sudden, in their mind, they are being treated what? Unfairly. They're getting ripped off. You mean I could have just worked 1 hour and got the same thing? but I worked all day? This is ridiculous. This is a joke. This is terrible. So they start to complain about it. Makes sense, right? This is an extraordinarily realistic story at this point, right? I mean, everything about this is completely believable, right? Every single thing. Absolutely they're upset. Sure they are. But we got to remember, what's the theme here? God does not see how man sees. God does not see how man sees. Man sees an injustice here. Moving ahead to verse 13. So they've just complained about being out there all day in the scorching heat and getting the same pay as the person that showed up for the last hour. And 13, but he answered, he being the landowner, he being the person in the story that represents the kingdom of God, says, but he answered and said to one of them, "Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what is yours and go. But I wish to give to the last man the same as to you. Is it not lawful for me to do what I wish with what is my own? Or is your eye envious because I am generous? So the last shall be first, and the first last. What just happened here? I mean, what just happened here? Not what we would have expected, right? This is not the ending that we would have thought. We would have thought that the person appealed to the landowner and said, this is not fair. Like, you're right, this isn't fair. Let me pay you more. Or let me at least give you something so that you'll be quiet. Maybe I might not give you, 8 times what I said, but maybe I'll double it so that you'll just calm down and leave. Right? It's not what happens. It's not what happens at all. He says, I'm doing you no wrong. This is what we agreed to. This is what we agreed to. But he says, but take what you want and go. But I wish to give to this last man the same as to you. That's my desire as the landowner and as the person who, owns what is being paid to you. This is mine. I can pay you what I want as long as I'm not being unfair to you. I did for you exactly what I said I was going to do, and this is what I want to do for them. So who are you to question that? Are you bitter? Are you angry because I am generous? And this is what I'm talking about earlier. Sometimes people's generosity does upset us when we are not the recipient of it. Especially when and if we feel like we should have been. I mean, the biggest example I think of with something like this is inheritances, right? How many problems have inheritances caused over the history of time because someone thinks they should have got something somebody else got, or they shouldn't have got something that they got? Happens all the time. Families are destroyed over this stuff. It's crazy. But because someone was generous, somebody else is upset. This is how God works. And this is what these folks need to understand. Because these folks lived in a time where certain people felt like they were entitled to godly blessings that other people were not entitled to. The easiest and most immediate application of this is the issue of Jews and Gentiles. The Jews had the first opportunity, and the Jews had the same opportunity to get exactly what God has promised them. But the difference is, so does everybody else. And just because everybody else started later doesn't mean they don't get the same thing that someone that started earlier. Because the landowner wants them all to have it. But when you look at the life of Jesus, you see a lot of other examples of this too. You see Jesus talking to the woman at the well. You see him dealing with the sick, with the downtrodden of society. You see him elevating women and children. That's what he does. He opens the door for the downtrodden. It's not just for the privileged now. He talks to the poor. He tells the woman that gives 2 mites that she's given more than everybody. That's not the way we see things. It's 2 mites. It's worthless. How much do we glorify, this kind of generosity versus that kind? Because this kind is better. God doesn't see it like that. And then, of course, all these things kind of lead to the big one, which God is very explicit about. Because who does God give grace to, and who does he oppose? He gives grace to the humble and opposes the proud. We're told that in the Old Testament and then again in the New. You see lots of times people coming to Jesus in his life for the purpose of stumping him. For the purpose of asking him a question he can't answer. For the purpose of backing him into a corner that he can't get out of. So that he can indict himself as some kind of blasphemer. And then you see other people, oftentimes the poor and downtrodden of society, coming to him, overcome with emotion just to be in his presence. To the point that they may be moved to tears and wash his feet with their tears and dry them with their hair. To the point that they stop everything in their life and follow him wherever he may go. I'm going to leave what I know and follow the homeless guy. Whoa. Follow the guy that doesn't always tell me where they're going. And sometimes when he does tell me stuff, I don't understand it. But it's the right thing to do. So therefore, I'm going to do it. There are lots of things to take from this story, not just the Jew-Gentile dynamic, but the fact that we need to try to see things through the eyes of Jesus and not the eyes of what we're told to look through and what we do look through most of the time. We need to see things as best we can the way God sees them. There is no reason, if you have been a Christian your entire life, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, 70 years, 80 years, 90 years, there is no reason to think that someone else isn't entitled to what you have if they come to Jesus. Because Jesus is telling them they can have it. And Jesus wants you to know that. He's not giving you your reward and sending you on your way and letting him deal with everybody else by himself. He wants us to know that. He wants us to know that, look, just because it's almost at the end of the day doesn't mean you shouldn't come out to the vineyard and join the work. Even with only an hour left, come work in the Lord's vineyard. It's not about how long you've been there. It's not about all you think you've done and haven't done. It's not about any of that stuff. It's not about who you are, what your name is, where you're from, who your parents are, what you look like, how much money you have. It's not about any of that. It's about getting in the vineyard of the Lord. That's what it's about. Every single one of us has flaws and problems and reasons to not do certain things. And Jesus just says, come to the vineyard. Come on. I'm going to take care of you. And I'm not taking care of you in a way that's unjust. Why? Because everything I promised to the people that showed up first, they get that too. No one gets shortchanged in the vineyard of the Lord. All the things that are promised by God are available to you, whether you've been working at this for 50 years or whether you've been working at this for 5 minutes. point is, let's work at it. Let's get in the field together. Let's get in the field together. We're not working toward a lifetime achievement award. We're not looking to move and, earn or deserve whatever it is, because Jesus is a giver of grace. You can't work in the field long enough. You can't. Not to earn it. Because you see, we don't have the blessings we have in God because of us. We have the blessings we have in God, because of Jesus, because of who he is. That's what we have. And when we understand that, it certainly can help us be more patient with other people. The trap we fall into is what these first workers fall into. I deserve the pay I'm getting. When God blesses me, I deserve it, and he should. And what's wrong with him if he doesn't? That's not who we want to be. That's not at all who we want to be. We want to be the people that take the invitation that Jesus offers to us, accept it. Go where we're supposed to go, do what we're supposed to do, be, more importantly, be who he wants us to be. Keep working to look more and more like him. And that's why it's so important for us to compare ourselves to him, not to each other. The workers in the vineyard were comparing themselves to each other and saying, I deserve more because I've done more than that guy. That misses the boat. I'm supposed to be like Jesus. And I missed the boat on that. That is what keeps us humble. That is what keeps reminding us that Jesus is a giver of grace, is the fact that the call is to be like him, and we fall short of the call constantly. And keeping that in the forefront of our mind allows us to love and be graceful to other people. It's hard to show grace to other people if you think you're always right and everybody has to agree with you all the time. And that's a very real temptation. I think if we're honest with ourselves, we can admit that. But Jesus says, no matter when you come, just come. Just come and it'll all be okay. I'll take care of you. And I think that's what we all want. I think we all want Jesus to take care of us. It doesn't matter what he does for you. God bless. Thank God for all he blesses you with. Thank God for that. We should be thankful that other people are blessed too. You should be thankful for that. And those things like envy and anger and vengeance and those things will start to melt away when we understand this idea. It will start to go away. There are a lot of differences between people, but the one thing every single person has in common is Jesus wants you in the vineyard. We all have that in common. We all share that truth. Jesus wants us in the vineyard. Do you want to go? Do you want to go? Don't worry about what time it is. Don't worry about how long you've already been there, or how long you haven't been, or all the times you said, no, I don't want to go. None of that matters right now. What matters is, are we going to the vineyard? If there's a way we can help you do that, you can express that by coming forward as we stand and sing.